Chapter 1, Tragic Crossing. When you didn't agree to this marriage, you could have told me and your father. Now, with only 3 days left until the wedding, you run off and jump in the river. Are you trying to drive me and your father to our graves? I always told your father you were the most obedient and filial of our 5 children. I never thought you'd be the most worrisome. Do you know how the villagers are gossiping, accusing your father and me of selling you off? We've toiled and suffered to raise you, and this is how you repay us. Thea Dawson's head throbbed, her vision blurry as she opened her eyes. The incessant chatter beside her made her ears ring. Losing her patience, she snapped, "Shut up." The room fell instantly silent, so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Holly Lewis, in a fit of rage, yelled, "Diana Dawson, how dare you speak to me like that?" Thea Dawson, clutching her aching head, shouted, "Are you deaf? I told you to get out. If you don't leave, don't blame me for being rude." If they didn't leave, she'd call the police. What kind of 5-star establishment was this, with such appalling service? Hearing the argument, Dylan Dawson hurried in from the doorway. Just as Holly Lewis raised her hand to strike Thea Dawson, he rushed forward, grabbing her arm. "Let's go outside," he said. Holly Lewis, consumed by fury, shrieked, "You told me to get out. You dare tell me to get out? I'll beat you to death." Dylan Dawson quickly pulled her from the room. Thea Dawson closed her eyes, her head in her hands, leaning against the cold wall. After a while, the pain subsided, but when she opened her eyes and saw her surroundings, confusion washed over her. Aged wooden beams, narrow wooden windows, rough, crumbling walls, a dirt floor, a dilapidated wardrobe, a rickety wooden table, and a broken wooden door. Where was this? Just then, a small, pale girl in patched clothes approached the bed and asked solicitously, "Big sister, are you feeling unwell?" Thea Dawson looked at the girl, a flood of memories that weren't hers surging into her mind. She clutched her head again in discomfort. Tammy Dawson said anxiously, "Big sister, does your head hurt? I'll go get mother and father to take you to the hospital." With that, the little girl hurried out. Absorbing the memories, Thea Dawson felt a profound sense of despair. She'd been returning home from the plateau to rest, not to die. And now she'd been caught up in this transmigration trend. Of all places, she'd been transported to this impoverished era, becoming the eldest daughter of Dylan Dawson, one of the poorest families in Hongqi village. Hearing that Thea Dawson was unwell, Holly Lewis, momentarily forgetting her anger, hurried over with Dylan Dawson. Entering the room, the couple saw Thea Dawson staring blankly around, their hearts sinking. Dylan Dawson coughed, clearing his throat, and said, "Diana, if you don't want to marry him, then don't. For heaven's sake, don't do anything foolish." Holly Lewis immediately flared up, retorting, "What nonsense are you spouting? We've used the betrothal gifts to pay off our debts, we've spent the engagement presents. If she doesn't marry, how will we repay the Rollins family?" Dylan Dawson mumbled stubbornly, "I'll borrow it." Surviving this jump into the river was a stroke of immense luck. If the engagement isn't broken off and she tries to hang herself while they aren't paying attention, she might not be so fortunate. Holly Lewis shrieked, "Borrow? Nearly 200 coins. Where will I borrow that from? Who would lend us that much? Borrow it from the village." Holly Lewis angrily shoved her husband out the door, then turned to Thea Dawson and said, "Diana, don't listen to their foolish talk. They don't have your best interests at heart. I carried you for 10 months and suffered to bring you into this world. Would I ever harm you? Seth Rollins is a bit older, yes, but older men are more caring." Thea Dawson, possessing the original Diana's memories, couldn't help but scoff coldly, "Just a bit older? He's 34 years old, and the original Diana wasn't even 17. He's nearly twice her age. And that old geezer already has 3 sons and a daughter. His eldest is 15, only 2 years younger than Diana was. And a decent man? He's clearly a walking disaster waiting to happen. Holly Lewis's face hardened. Yes, Seth Rollins is considerably older than you, but he's promised to arrange a job for you once you're married. At this, her eyes lit up. Diana, once you have a paying job, you'll have a monthly wage. You won't have to keep toiling away like your father and I, breaking our backs just to scrape by, working ourselves to death and still never having enough food or clothes, unable to even afford a bit of meat for the New Year's feast. These past few years, because we're so poor, we haven't even been able to afford gifts for your grandparents on holidays. I've been too ashamed to even visit my family. Diana, I don't want you to live like this. As she spoke, her eyes reddened. Thea Dawson, initially furious, feeling like her parents were selling her off, fell silent at her mother's words. She had grown up with her paternal grandparents and often overheard them talking about the past. Coupled with the original Diana's memories, she knew how desperately rural folk craved a salaried job. Any chance to go to the city, even if the terms were unreasonable, was met with desperate eagerness, a kind of frenzy. Diana Dawson hated this arranged marriage, but the 360-coin betrothal gift and the promise of a job made it impossible to refuse. Seeing her daughter's silence, Holly Lewis assumed she had been persuaded. All right then, stay put in the house for these next 3 days. After you're married in 3 days, settle down with Seth Rollins and live a peaceful life. Don't pull any more of these suicidal stunts. Thea Dawson enunciated each word. I want to break off the engagement. Exasperated by her daughter's continued defiance, Holly Lewis lost her temper and yelled, "Why did I have to give birth to such a fool? You'll believe the words of any stranger, but your own mother's pleas fall on deaf ears. Diana Dawson, I'm telling you, you'll have to walk over my dead body if you want to break off this engagement." The loud voice nearly deafened Thea Dawson. If it were the original Thea, she might have given in, but the current Thea Dawson couldn't. However, she knew her parents loved the original Thea and agreed to this marriage because they wanted her to have a good life. Therefore, Thea Dawson wouldn't confront Holly Lewis. Thea Dawson gave a cold snort. "Mother, are you calling me stupid? The stupid one is you. That man said he'd find me a job, are you certain he'll actually do it?" Holly Lewis was startled, but her expression remained confident. "He told your father and me right in front of Auntie Turner. It can't be a lie. This Auntie Turner was the matchmaker who arranged the marriage." Thea Dawson didn't care if her mother was feigning ignorance or gambling. She bluntly said, "Once I'm married, it's a done deal. What if he doesn't keep his promise? Can you beat him to death or bring me back home?" They certainly couldn't. This wasn't the 21st century. In this era, divorce was a shameful thing. Holly Lewis felt a pang of panic, but quickly recovered. "Seth Rollins is a cadre. Arranging a job for you isn't difficult. He has no reason to lie to us. All right, stop overthinking. The job is definitely not a problem." Thea Dawson saw the unease in Holly Lewis's eyes, but her mother refused to budge. Thea's face darkened. She knew further discussion was pointless. Holly was completely captivated by the promise of a job. "Father, come in." After Dylan Dawson entered, Thea Dawson said to him, "Jobs are incredibly hard to find right now. You both know that, right?" Holly Lewis, still trying to dissuade her daughter from breaking off the engagement, said irritably, "Not just hard to find, but impossible. Factories only hire people with city huku. Rural huku aren't even eligible to apply." Of course, there were 3 ways for those with rural huku to find work: day labor, changing professions, or graduating from a worker-peasant-soldier university and being assigned a job. But none of these applied to their family. Thea Dawson naturally understood this. She said, "Not only are rural huku ineligible for factory jobs, but many with city huku can't find work either. That's why so many are sent to the countryside for re-education. Their commune had many such cases, some even marrying and settling down there. There was no need for her to elaborate. Holly Lewis still didn't believe Seth Rollins was lying to her, or rather, she couldn't bear to give up the job he'd promised. Dinah, Seth is the head of logistics at the mine. Finding you a job isn't difficult. Thea Dawson said bluntly, his eldest son is 15, old enough to work. Even if he could arrange something, he'd arrange it for his own son first. Do you really think a fiancé he's met twice is more important than his own flesh and blood? In this era, 16 was the legal working age, though birth dates could be altered if needed. In her memories, no one ever praised Diana Dawson's beauty. They only commended her diligence and filial piety, saying any family would be lucky to have her as a daughter-in-law. Such teasing only stopped after Dylan Dawson decided she should choose a husband instead. Thinking of this, Thea Dawson scoffed, that Seth Rollins wants to buy a wife for 360 yuan, someone docile to serve his entire family. Saying Seth Rollins was buying a wife was akin to saying they were selling their daughter. If anyone with ulterior motives overheard, wouldn't they be sent for re-education? Holly Lewis, furious and distressed, struck Thea Dawson, but Dylan Dawson intercepted the blow after the first hit. Dylan Dawson said, "Big girl, your mother and I weren't thinking clearly and almost pushed you into a fiery pit. Don't worry, we'll go to the Rollins family and break off the engagement right now." The Rollins family had sent matchmaker Aunt Turner to propose 3 times. The first time, Dylan and Holly Lewis refused outright. The second time, they offered $360 as a betrothal gift, which Dylan Dawson also flatly rejected. The third time, they offered the $360 and a job for Diana Dawson, and only then did Dylan Dawson agree. Hearing this, Thea Dawson's remaining anger dissipated. The Dawsons' house leaked when it rained, and they owed the collective $180 and a considerable amount of grain. The conditions offered by Seth Rollins were hard to refuse, even if they had doubts, they'd likely gamble on it. They were desperate, driven by poverty, to take a chance. Dylan Dawson pulled Holly Lewis out, but she quickly circled back and tried to lock the door. Thea Dawson grew impatient seeing her mother's persistence. Holly Lewis, eyes red-rimmed, said, "Break it off. You make it sound so easy. We not only owe the collective, but we also bought a lot of things the other day when they collected debts. We don't have the money to return to the Rollins family. Even if the Rollins family were calculating, if the engagement were broken, the betrothal and engagement gifts would have to be returned in full. This money was essential, otherwise, it would be difficult to marry off their other daughters." Playing the guilt card? Too bad Thea Dawson wasn't falling for it. "Knowing it's a fiery pit, you still wanted me to jump in." Holly Lewis cried, "Big girl, breaking off the engagement isn't just about the money. Seth Rollins knows a lot of people. If we humiliate him by breaking it off, he'll take revenge, and our family will suffer. Big girl, please, for our family, don't be stubborn." Diana Dawson, in her kindness, wanted a better life for her family, so even knowing it wasn't a good match, she bore the burden. Thea Dawson felt a pang of sympathy for her understanding sister. She scoffed, "He works in the mines in the neighboring county. He doesn't have that much power. Besides, even a king can be defeated by a desperate man. If he dares to retaliate, I'll report him, and he'll be sent back to farm the fields, if he's lucky." Holly Lewis's heart nearly leaped out of her chest. She couldn't understand how her eldest daughter had become so bold after just one jump in the river. But after a moment of reflection, it made sense, and her fear subsided. "Big girl, if you break off the engagement, your reputation will be ruined, and it will be hard to find a good marriage. Big girl, I'm afraid you'll regret it." Thea Dawson, tired of arguing, played her trump card, "If you insist on marrying me off, I'll take rat poison and die with that beast at the Rollins family. Just don't regret it when the time comes." Of course, the threat of a double suicide was just to scare Holly Lewis. Dying and not returning to her own time would be a terrible loss. If it came to that, she'd simply sever ties. Holly Lewis's legs turned to jelly with fear. "You damn girl," she said sternly, "what nonsense are you spouting?" Thea Dawson didn't bother repeating herself, simply fixing her mother with a cold stare. A chill ran down Holly Lewis's spine. Remembering Thea's fall into the river, she sighed in defeat. "Forget it," she said, her voice laced with bitterness. "If you won't marry, then you won't marry. It's not in our fate." With that, Holly Lewis hobbled out of the room. Exhausted from her outburst, Thea Dawson leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Hearing footsteps, she cracked them open. "Does your head still hurt?" Tammy Dawson asked anxiously. Thea Dawson shook her head. "I'm fine," she reassured her. "Don't worry. I'm hungry, though. Go make some food." Seeing that her elder sister seemed all right, Tammy Dawson went off to do her chores. Considering her family's situation, Thea Dawson massaged her temples. Dylan and Holly Dawson had 6 daughters. Diana, the original Thea, was diligent and kind, helping Dylan with housework and looking after her younger sisters from the age of 4. Nancy was proud and quick-tempered, ready to strike any sister who disobeyed. Tammy was quiet and hard-working, obedient to her eldest sister. Toby was gluttonous, always hungry. Naomi was like, hoarding possessions. Lydia and Naomi were twins. Holly nearly died giving birth to them, and it took almost a year for her to recover. The twins were small and Holly couldn't produce enough milk. Following a recommendation, they gave the healthier twin, Lydia, to a childless couple in town. Ironically, when Lydia was 3, her adoptive mother became pregnant, leaving Lydia feeling like an unwanted extra. Lost in thought, Thea Dawson suddenly felt a burning sensation in her stomach. It quickly spread throughout her body, causing her to double over in pain. Tammy Dawson entered, carrying 2 bowls. Seeing Thea's state, she asked urgently, "What's wrong?" "Hungry." "Then eat quickly." She added, "Let me feed you." After finishing a bowl of sweet potato mixed with rice and 2 eggs, Thea Dawson felt like she'd come back to life. She hadn't taken her grandparents' stories of starvation seriously before, but now, having experienced it herself, she understood the true misery of hunger. Tammy Dawson, holding the empty bowl, asked, "Sister, are you feeling better now?" Before Thea Dawson could answer, someone burst in. Seeing the empty bowl, Toby Dawson wailed, "Why did you eat all the eggs?" The accusation implied that she habitually stole food. Thea Dawson frowned and looked up at Toby Dawson without speaking. She had Diana's memories and knew Toby wasn't fond of hygiene, but she hadn't realized how truly grubby she was. Toby's hair was a bird's nest, her face streaked with dirt, and her clothes were covered in grime. Frankly, a beggar looked cleaner. Inheriting Diana's feelings along with her memories, Thea Dawson frowned. "Don't you feel uncomfortable being so filthy?" she scolded. "Go wash yourself, now." Her tone brooked no argument. Denied an egg and feeling ostracized, Toby Dawson sullenly went outside. Tammy Dawson, seated beside the bed, spoke softly, "The Rollins family isn't a good match, but if you didn't want to marry, you could have told Mother and Father. Why jump in the river?" Mother fainted when she heard. Recalling Holly Lewis's mention of her supposed suicide attempt, Thea Dawson, already irritated by the Rollins family affair, simply asked, "Who told you I jumped in the river?" Tammy Dawson, without much thought, replied, "Penny. She said she saw you jump, and Lily accidentally fell in too. She couldn't save both, so she saved Lily, who was closer. By the time she got back to you, you'd swam ashore, but you were unconscious." Thea Dawson, after hearing this, couldn't help but curse, "Bullshit." Penny Turner, also from the Dawsons' village, had little interaction with Thea. Thea couldn't believe Penny, so young, would steal Diana's credit and spread lies about her jumping in the river. Tammy Dawson, surprised, asked, "Sister, I know you wouldn't do something like that. Did you fall in like Lily?" Thea Dawson, instead of answering, inquired, "How did you find out?" Seeing her sister's silence, Tammy's voice dropped, "Sister, the whole village knows. You must explain, so they'll stop blaming mother and father." Blaming them for what? Through their interaction, she had come to accept Dylan Dawson as her father. Tammy Dawson, distressed, whispered, "They say they forced you to jump because of the bride price, that they're bad people." "It's not true. I tried to explain, but they called me stupid." "I'm not stupid, they're wronging mother and father. Mother may be harsh and scold us, but she only hits us when we're wrong. She always gives us the best food. Not like Tilly Green next door, who's beaten and starved, never gets any meat." Thea Dawson stroked her sister's head and asked, "What does Lily's family say?" Tammy Dawson shook her head. "Lily's at the town hospital, she hasn't returned." "Sister, you didn't jump, did you?" She clearly wouldn't let it go without an answer. Thea Dawson replied without hesitation, "Of course not." "Tammy, you said the whole village knows. Does everyone believe Penny?" "Yes, everyone believes Penny saved Lily." "Sister, I'll go explain." Tammy tugged at her sleeve. Hearing the villagers' accusations against Dylan and Holly Dawson, Tammy felt compelled to clear their names. Compared to Tilly Green, Dylan and Holly were the best parents in the world in Tammy's eyes. Thea Dawson, however, disagreed, waving her hand. "It's not urgent. Let's wait for Lily to return. Eldest sister, are you still angry with father and mother? They know they were wrong, can't you forgive them?" Thea Dawson, surprised that the usually quiet Tammy Dawson was so filial, explained, "It's not that I don't want to explain, but even if I tell everyone I didn't jump in the river, they won't believe me." Tammy Dawson anxiously asked, "Then what should we do? Just let them slander father and mother?" Thea Dawson shook her head. "Of course not. Don't worry, this will be resolved within 2 days. As soon as Lily Dawson returns and tells everyone that Diana Dawson was the real rescuer, this rumor will naturally collapse." 2 days was bearable, Tammy Dawson agreed. Lying in bed was uncomfortable, so Thea Dawson left the room. Though she knew this room was extremely dilapidated, seeing it again was still a shock. The house was low and uneven, the mud on the walls peeling off in patches, black and white like a giant, ugly monster. But no matter how ugly it was built bit by Dylan Dawson and Holly Lewis. According to the original Thea's grandmother, they had poured all their strength into building this house. Thinking of how hard her parents worked day and night to feed the family, Thea Dawson's lingering resentment towards Holly Lewis dissipated. As Thea Dawson bent down to wash her hands, she froze, staring at her reflection, arched brows, almond-shaped eyes, an oval face, and a delicate, high-bridged nose. Tammy Dawson, seeing her sister staring blankly at the wooden basin, nudged her gently. "Eldest sister, what's wrong?" Thea Dawson, regaining her composure, smiled. "Nothing." She had wondered why that old man was willing to offer such a generous betrothal gift and even deceive Dylan Dawson and his wife with manual labor. Now she understood. This girl's skin was tanned from working outdoors year-round, her complexion poor due to poverty, and her long bangs hid her features. But with proper nourishment, some skin-whitening care, and a bit of dressing up, she would be a great beauty, no less stunning than those actresses. Thea Dawson's gloomy mood instantly lifted. In her past life, her appearance was merely passable, and she'd envied beautiful people. Now, she had this advantage. Thump. Nancy Taylor heavily set the wooden bucket in her hands on the ground and yelled angrily, "Diana Dawson, you've caused father and mother to be scolded by the whole village, and our family is almost dirt poor. How can you still smile?" Diana Dawson, good-natured and always yielding to her younger siblings, had never argued with Nancy Taylor. But Thea Dawson wasn't so tolerant. Looking at Nancy Taylor's pie-like face, she said coldly, I caused it. Tell me, how did I cause it? The original Thea inherited the best features of Dylan Dawson and Holly Lewis. Nancy Dawson, conversely, inherited all the flaws of both families. She was plump, with a flat face, a flat nose, and thick lips. It was fortunate she was strong, or Holly Lewis would have worried herself sick. Nancy Dawson fumed, if you didn't want this marriage, why didn't you say so earlier? Now, after using up all the money at home, you jumped in the river. Do you want to ruin our whole family? Thea Dawson laughed coldly, why didn't I object to this marriage before? It was because I wanted my parents and siblings to have a good life that I decided to sacrifice myself. Are you truly this angry because you're heartbroken for your parents? No, you're resentful because you feel your good fortune has slipped away and things might even be worse than before. But what right do you have to resent me? The original Thea was truly good to her younger sisters, always letting them have things first and willingly taking the short end of the stick. Fortunately, Tammy Dawson and Naomi Dawson weren't bad and listened to her completely, while Nancy Taylor and Toby Dawson didn't take her seriously. Nancy Dawson felt a pang of guilt. Dylan and Holly Dawson had originally intended for Diana Dawson to choose a husband, but because of the Rollins family, they decided to let her choose instead. She recalled the many proposals that had come in and how Diana's job helped support the family, making her a good candidate for an arranged marriage. The fact that all of them had fallen through filled her with resentment. Thea Dawson considered the girl's personality but didn't say anything. Everyone has a selfish side, and Nancy Dawson's calculations were understandable. It's just that she wasn't the original Thea and couldn't tolerate them the same way. Nancy Dawson, I'm your older sister. If you ever yell at me, talk down to me, or lay a hand on me again, I'll beat you to death. After all, in this place, hitting someone younger was a normal occurrence. Nancy Dawson lowered her head and said nothing. After more than half an hour, a whistle blew outside. Nancy Taylor and Tammy Dawson hurriedly left for work. Toby Dawson ran out to play, and Naomi Dawson tidied up the clothes in the room. Thea Dawson patted the girl's head and said, go out and play too. Children in the family didn't hide their thoughts, so Naomi Dawson shook her head and said, eldest sister, third sister told me to stay home with you. Thea Dawson chuckled silently. Keeping her company was a pretense, the real reason was fear that she might do something foolish again. She hadn't expected Tammy Dawson, with her quiet nature and few words, to be so thoughtful and caring. Watching the thin and frail Naomi Dawson busying herself, Thea Dawson felt ashamed to sit idly by and watch her work. About half an hour later, footsteps sounded outside. Thea Dawson looked up and saw her parents returning with someone. The man was dressed in a Zhongshan suit with a fountain pen clipped to the left side of his chest. His face was puffy like a steamed bun, and his narrow eyes held a sleazy look. This sleazy-looking fellow was none other than the marriage fraud, Seth Rollins. Needless to say, this man returning with Dylan and Holly Dawson meant the attempt to break off the engagement had failed. Thinking of this, Thea Dawson's face immediately darkened. Before Thea Dawson could say anything, Holly Lewis pulled her into a room. Pinched her hard, and hissed, why did I give birth to such a fool? You've already been taken advantage of by him, and you still want to break off the engagement. If this gets out, who will marry you? You damned girl, are you trying to drive your father and me to our deaths? Thea Dawson laughed in anger, pushed Holly Lewis away, then grabbed a cracked porcelain vase from the table and walked out. Seeing Thea Dawson storming towards him, Seth Rollins hurriedly said, Diana, I didn't lie to everyone, I've found a job, you marry. Before he could finish, Thea Dawson smashed the porcelain vase on his head, marry your mother * king head. After cursing, Thea Dawson kicked Seth Rollins to the ground, continuing to kick and curse him, you bastard, you committed marriage fraud and still want to ruin my reputation. I'll beat you to death today. When she was 5, the daughter of a relative was harmed while studying abroad. Her grandfather, frightened, promptly enrolled her in martial arts training. After years of practice, handling a grown man was no problem. Seth Rollins screamed like a stuck pig. Dylan Dawson and Holly Lewis, witnessing their usually gentle daughter transform into a raging tigress, were stunned. Only when Seth Rollins shrieked for help did they snap out of it. Holly Lewis tried to intervene but was shoved aside by Thea Dawson. Finally, Dylan Dawson pulled her back. Most villagers were working in the fields, but quite a few elderly and children remained at home. A child, hearing the commotion, ran over to watch the excitement, only to see Seth Rollins' bloodied head and flee screaming for their mother, dropping their mud pie in terror. Holly Lewis initially wanted to scold Thea Dawson, but upon noticing the child witness the scene, she nearly fainted. Her daughter's sudden, frenzied outburst made it impossible to contain the situation. Seth Rollins, humiliated beyond measure, wiped the blood from his face as he rose from the ground. "Thea Dawson, you dare hit me. I'll have you reported to the police, you'll rot in jail." Holly Lewis sank to the ground in fear, Dylan Dawson's legs also turning to jelly. Thea Dawson, feeling her blows were too light, swung the stick again, giving him another beating before finding a rope in the kitchen and tying him up. After securing him, she addressed the stunned Holly Lewis, "Mother, go and fetch the village chief." Seeing Holly Lewis frozen in place, Thea Dawson pressed, "If you don't want me arrested, go and get the village chief and the women's leader, now." Dylan Dawson, looking at his calm-faced daughter, wiped the sweat from his brow with his sleeve. "Wife, quickly go and get the village chief and chairwoman Kat." Hearing this, Holly Lewis immediately bolted. By the time village chief Dawson and the women's leader arrived, a crowd had gathered in Dylan Dawson's yard. "What are you all gawking at? Get back to work." Reluctant to leave the spectacle, they only dispersed when village chief Dawson threatened to deduct work points. Village chief Dawson and chairwoman Elizabeth Cat were shocked upon entering the main room. Seth Rollins' face and forehead were covered in blood, and he was tied up like a dumpling. Village chief Dawson sternly addressed Dylan, "What have you done?" Who? A rotten eggplant stuffed in his mouth prevented Seth Rollins from speaking. Village chief Dawson urged, "Dylan, untie him. We can talk this through. If this escalates to murder, you'll pay with your life." A murder in the village would not only bring shame upon everyone but also cost them any future benefits from the commune. Thea Dawson stepped forward. "Village chief, this has nothing to do with my father. I hit this animal." Village chief Dawson was skeptical, but Thea Dawson's claim changed the situation. "He played along, why did you hit him?" That morning, Dylan Dawson had come to him to borrow money, explaining he wanted to break off the engagement with the Rollins family and return the betrothal gifts. He readily lent the money. Thea Dawson had already attempted suicide by jumping into the river. If he hadn't lent the money and something happened, he would have been held responsible. Thea Dawson, glancing at Captain Dawson leaning towards her, felt a slight sense of relief, because he tricked me with a false promise of a job and then slandered me, ruining my reputation. Hearing this, Seth Rollins struggled violently, grunting and attempting to explain himself. Unfortunately, both Captain Dawson's and Elizabeth Cat's attention was now fixed on Thea Dawson. Elizabeth Cat, surprised by the mention of trickery, said, "Didn't the Smith family offer a 360-coin bride price? How can it be considered a trick?" Because Dylan Dawson and his wife used the bride price to pay off the team's debts, everyone in the village knew about it, and some people even said they sold their daughter. Thea Dawson explained, "Initially, he offered a 360-coin bride price, but my parents weren't happy with the marriage. Then he deceived them, saying he had secured a job for me, and I could start working as soon as I was married. Only then did they agree." Captain Dawson turned to Dylan Dawson and his wife, asking, "Is everything Diana said true?" He had previously wondered why Dylan Dawson and Holly Lewis, who clearly loved Diana, would marry her off to such a man for a mere 360-coin bride price. But if there was a job involved, it made more sense. They both nodded, Holly Lewis's eyes reddening as she said, yes, her father and I thought that with a job, Diana could have a good life, so we agreed. Understanding, Captain Dawson asked, so, you're saying the job offer was a lie? Seeing her nod, Captain Dawson further inquired, and what about the slander and ruining your reputation? Thea Dawson pinched herself hard, tears welling up in her eyes. Through her tears, she said, my parents wanted to break off the engagement, but he refused. He then spread lies, claiming we had been intimate. My parents, believing him, didn't dare to call off the wedding. He came here today to force me to marry him, threatening to tell everyone I had lost my virtue to him, that I was damaged goods. In my anger, I lost control and hit him with a ceramic vase, then beat him. Seth Rollins looked at Thea Dawson with a terrified expression. He had claimed intimacy with Thea Dawson, confident that her parents wouldn't dare reveal such a thing and would quietly marry her off to him. He hadn't anticipated that Thea Dawson would be willing to risk her reputation to avoid marrying him. Holly Lewis nearly fainted. How could such words be uttered publicly? If this spread, how could they face anyone? Hearing this, Elizabeth Catt couldn't help but scrutinize Thea Dawson from head to toe, but Thea Dawson remained completely unfazed by her gaze. Thea Dawson scoffed, saying, Captain, I've only met him twice, both times at my home, and Tammy Dawson and Naomi Dawson were with me the entire time. I haven't seen him since the engagement. He's saying these things to force me into marriage. Captain Dawson pulled the chewed-up carrot out of Seth Rollins's mouth and asked, is everything Diana said true? Did you use a false promise of a job to trick the Dawson family into agreeing to the marriage? Seth Rollins vehemently denied it. No, the job is real. I've already found it for her. She can start as soon as she marries me. Seeing his persistent hope, Thea Dawson said mockingly, then tell me, what kind of job did you find for me? I'm talking about a proper job, not some temporary position where I can be fired at any moment. Seth Rollins felt a jolt in his heart. Why did Thea Dawson understand these things? Anyone who joins the factory has to start as a temp. He assumed Dylan Dawson and Holly Lewis, with their limited knowledge, wouldn't understand the outside world. He thought he could sweet-talk them. Once she was married, he figured, any fuss wouldn't matter. He never expected a twist 3 days before the wedding. Captain Dawson asked directly, just tell me straight what the job is. No need for the fluff. If Seth Rollins worked at the county factory, he would have shown some respect, but since he worked in another county, unrelated to them, there was no need for pleasantries. It's a sanitation worker in the factory. Captain Dawson frowned. Sanitation workers have to train at the hospital and pass an exam before being assigned. Thea, though literate, knows nothing about medicine or diseases. How could she be a sanitation worker? Seth Rollins quickly explained, not a sanitation worker who treats people, but a cleaner who sweeps the yard. A cleaning job being called sanitation worker, Thea Dawson almost cursed. For a farmer, getting a paid job was a blessing, and they couldn't be picky. However, the captain sensed malice and continued, how long until it becomes permanent? Seth Rollins' face stiffened. 6 months, he said. Captain Dawson didn't believe him. My GNU often goes to the county to deliver goods. He'll check it out. If I hear you lied, I'll report you to the police. Seth Rollins broke out in a cold sweat. The mine wasn't hiring cleaners. Someone with a slipped disc needed a 6-month replacement. This wasn't a secret, anyone at the mine would know. Captain Dawson, I truly wanted to marry, so I got confused. But since Thea isn't interested, forget it. Unripe melons aren't sweet. I agree to break off the engagement. Captain Dawson didn't want to escalate things. Thea, what do you think? He asked. Thea Dawson was unrelenting. She insisted on taking him to the police. If reported, he'd lose his job. Seth Rollins was finally afraid. Thea, I was blinded by greed. Please forgive me. If you don't report me, I'll compensate you. Captain Dawson didn't want to involve the police. Firstly, it would be shameful. Secondly, he feared the gossip would crush Thea. Seeing Thea's unwavering stance, he called the family to persuade her. Thea Dawson was resolute. Captain, don't try to persuade me. I won't change my mind. Captain Dawson hadn't expected such firmness. But it was good. With someone strong in the next generation, no one would dare bully their family. You want to take him to the police, but have you thought about what will happen after? I ain't scared of gossip. It's just small-town chatter to kill time, right? Let em talk, it don't take a chunk out of me. 2 more years till I'm out of this burg and back to university, anyway. The captain shook his head. Diana, old man Rollins was a right thug in his day, and his 3 brothers are just as bad. If you take Seth Rollins to the police and he loses his job, you're making a blood feud. Your family won't see a peaceful day after that. Letting him off ain't gonna guarantee peace either. Captain Dawson said, with a job, he's got something to lose, so he won't dare retaliate. But if you make a fuss and he loses his job, a cornered dog will bite. His whole family will come after yours. Your pa's the only man in the house. What'll happen to your family if something bad happens to him? That laid it all out plain and simple. Thea Dawson went quiet, then stepped outside and told Seth Rollins, "Fine, I won't report you. But you're writin' a confession admittin' you defrauded me into this marriage and slandered my name. If you don't write it, I'm taking you to the police right now." With that confession, even if Seth Rollins held a grudge, he wouldn't dare lay a finger on her family, at least not for a while. And later, if she couldn't even handle a punk like Seth Rollins, she'd have lived all these years for nothing. Captain Dawson looked at Thea Dawson with new eyes. To protect his job, even though Seth Rollins was fuming, he gritted his teeth and wrote the confession, 2 copies, signed and thumbprint. Captain Dawson and Elizabeth Catt witnessed it and signed as well. Thea Dawson kept 1 copy of the confession and gave the other to Captain Dawson right in front of Seth Rollins, saying, if anything happened to her, he should give it to the police. The captain agreed. Seth Rollins was shocked and scared. He never thought Thea Dawson would be so shrewd. If he'd known she was this sharp, he never would have come proposing. Elizabeth Catt, hearing about the marriage fraud, exclaimed, "Didn't the Rollins family give $360 as a betrothal gift? How is that fraud?" Everyone in the village knew Dylan Dawson and his wife used the betrothal gift to pay off their debts to the team, which led to whispers about them selling their daughter. Thea Dawson said, "At first, they offered $360, and my parents weren't keen on the marriage. Then he lied and told them he'd secured a job for me, that I'd start work as soon as I was married. That's when they agreed." Captain Dawson looked at Dylan Dawson and his wife. Is what Diana's saying true? He'd been wondering why Dylan Dawson and Holly Lewis, who clearly loved Diana, would marry her off to a man like that for a mere $360. But if a job was involved, it made more sense. They both nodded. Holly Lewis, her eyes reddening, said, "Yes, her pa and I thought with a job, Diana could have a good life, so we agreed." Captain Dawson understood. "So, you're saying the job was a lie?" Seeing her nod, Captain Dawson asked, "And what about this slander, this ruining of your reputation?" Thea Dawson pinched herself hard, tears streaming down her face. "My parents wanted to break off the engagement," she sobbed, "but he refused and spread lies about us having relations. My parents believed him and didn't dare call it off. He followed me here to force me to marry him, threatening to tell everyone I'd been with him, that I was damaged goods. I lost my temper, grabbed a vase, and hit him with it, then gave him a good beating." Seth Rollins looked at Thea Dawson with a terrified expression. He'd been certain that by claiming intimacy with Thea Dawson, her parents wouldn't dare expose the lie and would quietly marry her off to him. He hadn't expected Diana Dawson to disregard her reputation and refuse him. Holly Lewis nearly fainted. How could an outsider utter such words? If this spread, how could they face anyone? Elizabeth Catt sized Thea Dawson up, but Thea remained unfazed by her scrutiny. Thea Dawson scoffed. "Captain, I've only met him twice, both times at home, with Tammy Dawson and Naomi present. I haven't seen him since the engagement. He's lying to force me to marry him." Captain Dawson pulled the rotten tomato out of Seth Rollins's mouth. "Is what Diana said true? Did you lie about having a job to trick the Lynn family into agreeing to the marriage?" Seth Rollins vehemently denied it. No, the job is real. I've already found it. She can start as soon as she marries me." Seeing his desperation, Thea Dawson sneered, "Oh really? What kind of job did you find me? I'm talking about a proper position, not some temporary gig that can disappear any minute." Seth Rollins was startled. How did Diana Dawson know about these things? Everyone starts with a temporary position at the factory. He'd assumed Dylan Dawson and Holly Lewis were ignorant of the outside world and easily fooled by the promise of a job. Once they were married, he figured they wouldn't cause a fuss. He hadn't anticipated this upheaval just 3 days before the wedding. Captain Dawson cut to the chase. "Just tell us what the job is. Skip the fluff." If Seth Rollins worked at the factory in their district, he might have shown some leniency, but if it was in another district, there was no need for courtesy. "It's, a sanitation worker at the factory." Captain Dawson frowned. Sanitation workers have to train at the hospital and pass an exam before being assigned. Diana may be literate, but she knows nothing about medicine or diseases. How could she be a sanitation worker? Seth Rollins quickly clarified, not a medical sanitation worker, a janitor. A sweeper. A cleaning job dressed up as a sanitation worker. Thea Dawson nearly cursed. For a peasant, finding paid work was a blessing from the ancestors, a job not to be picky about. However, the team captain sensed malice hidden within him and pressed further, "How long until it becomes permanent?" Seth Rollins' expression hardened. 6 months, he replied. Team Captain Dawson, no longer trusting him, said pointedly, "My GNU often hauls goods to the county. He'll conveniently check on this. If I hear you've lied, I'll report you to the authorities." A cold sweat broke out on Seth Rollins. There was no sanitation position at the mine. There was only a worker with a slipped disc needing 6 months off, and they were looking for a temporary replacement. This wasn't a secret, anyone could find out by asking around the mine. Team Captain Dawson, I was blinded by infatuation, truly wanting to marry. But since Diana isn't interested, let's forget it. Unripe melons aren't sweet. I agree to break off the engagement. Team Captain Dawson, not wanting to escalate the situation, asked Thea Dawson, "What do you think about this?" Thea Dawson was unmoved, still insistent on taking him to the authorities. His job was on the line if she reported him. Terror finally gripped Seth Rollins. "Diana, I was blinded by greed. Please, spare me this time. If you agree not to report me, I can compensate you." Team Captain Dawson didn't want to escalate things by involving the authorities. Firstly, it would reflect poorly on him. Secondly, he feared Thea Dawson wouldn't be able to bear the weight of gossip and rumors. Seeing Thea Dawson's unwavering stance, he called upon her family to reason with her. Thea Dawson's resolve was firm. "Team Captain, there's no need to persuade me. I won't change my mind." Team Captain Dawson hadn't expected such firmness from her. However, it was also a good thing. With someone strong in the next generation, others wouldn't dare bully their family. "You're determined to take him to the authorities, but have you considered the consequences?" "I'm not afraid of gossip. It was just idle chatter to pass the time. Let them talk, it wouldn't take a piece out of her. Besides, in 2 years, the university entrance exam restrictions would be lifted, and she'd be leaving this place. The team captain shook his head. Diana, old man sure was a thug in his youth, and his 3 brothers are all ruthless. If you report Seth Rollins and he loses his job, you'll be making a mortal enemy. Your family will never have peace. Even if I spare him, there's no guarantee of peace. Team Captain Dawson said, with a job, he'll have something to lose and won't dare retaliate. But if you cause him to lose his job, a cornered dog will jump over a wall. His whole family will come after yours. Your family only has your father as a man. What will you do if something unfortunate happens? This laid bare the stark reality of their situation. Thea Dawson fell silent. She went outside and told Seth Rollins, I won't report you, but you must write a confession admitting to the marriage deception and slandering my reputation. If you don't, I'll take you to the authorities right now. With this confession, even if Seth Rollins harbored resentment, he wouldn't dare act against her family, at least not in the short term. As for the future, if she couldn't even handle a Seth Rollins, she'd have lived all these years in vain. Captain Dawson looked at Thea Dawson with different eyes than before. To protect his job, even though Seth Rollins was unhappy, he gritted his teeth and wrote a letter of apology, making 2 copies, then signing and fingerprinting them. Captain Dawson and Elizabeth Catt, as witnesses, also signed above. Thea Dawson kept one of the 2 apology letters and gave the other to Captain Dawson right in front of Seth Rollins, saying that if anything unexpected happened to her, she would hand this confession letter over to the police. Captain Dawson agreed. Seth Rollins was both shocked and scared. He hadn't thought Thea Dawson would act so shrewdly. Had he known she was this formidable, he absolutely wouldn't have come to propose. Not only a letter of apology, Thea Dawson also took 160 coins as compensation for reputational damage. Elizabeth Catt felt it was too much, knowing that a town worker only earned about 20 coins a month. She pulled Thea Dawson aside and said, Diana, if this gets out, people will think you're greedy, and it'll be hard to talk about marriage. Thea Dawson asked back, slightly surprised, and Catt, there are only 6 of us here, if we don't tell, who will know? After saying that, she looked toward Seth Rollins and asked, if I hear even half a whisper about me outside, I'll take this letter to the police. Seth Rollins hastily replied, don't worry, miss, I won't breathe a word. If I do, may I die a horrible death with no place to be buried. He was now regretting it like crazy. Had he known Diana Dawson would become like a vengeful demon after falling into the river, he should have agreed to break off the engagement earlier. He wouldn't have had to come running and suffer such a beating and lose so much money. Thea Dawson snorted, wash the blood off your head and face and get out. With his weakness in Thea Dawson's hands, Seth Rollins didn't dare to object. He cleaned himself up and hurriedly left. Seeing the matter resolved, Captain Dawson also left with Elizabeth Catt. After going outside, he said to Elizabeth Catt, don't tell anyone about what just happened, otherwise, if Diana really gets confused and jumps into the river again, it'll be a great sin on you. Elizabeth Catt's face stiffened, and she said unnaturally, Captain, what are you saying? How could I dare to spread such a thing? Good to know. He then left. As soon as Captain Dawson and the others left, Holly Lewis rushed forward and snatched the money from Thea Dawson's hand, looking as if she was afraid it would disappear if she was a moment late. Seeing Thea Dawson frown, Dylan Dawson asked, Diana, we shouldn't take this money. Thea Dawson asked strangely, the Rollins family tricked me into an engagement and then ruined my reputation, why can't I accept compensation? Besides, only by making him pay the price will he know we're not easy to mess with, otherwise he'll definitely take revenge on us. People are like that, the foolish fear the reckless fear the ruthless, and the ruthless fear the desperate. Seth Rollins knew she was fierce and unafraid of death, so he wouldn't dare to act rashly. Dylan Dawson, after hearing this, felt it made sense and said quietly, "After this incident, you're not allowed to do anything crazy again." Holly Lewis's heart stirred. Her daughter, after her suicide attempt, had become much more aggressive, like a different person. Her heart pounded as she forced herself to ask calmly, "Diana, how did you suddenly become so strong, kicking someone to the ground with one kick?" Thea Dawson quickly thought of a reason, saying, "It's not about great strength, it's just the right touch. Granny Chu taught me these things, but they weren't useful before, so I didn't tell you too." When Diana was 6, she carried Nancy Dawson on her back to cut pigweed and accidentally hit her head, causing a lot of bleeding. On their way back to the village, they met an old woman named Chu Nok Tu, who stopped the bleeding and applied medicine. Thanks to her, Diana's forehead didn't scar. Chu Nok Tu's husband was from Dawson's village. When Diana was 5, she arrived in Dawson's village carrying her husband's ashes. No one had seen her before. But with her marriage certificate and 3 lumps of money, she easily built a house in the village. At that time, the villagers advised her to adopt a child, but she refused, living alone. When Diana was 8, Chu Nok Tu accidentally fell and broke her leg. The team assigned someone to care for her, but they weren't attentive. When Diana visited and saw this, she immediately reported it to the team leader and then took on the responsibility of caring for the elderly woman, washing clothes, cooking, serving tea and water, with utmost dedication. After Chu Nok Tu recovered, she taught Diana to read. Diana was intelligent and hardworking, and with the old woman's help, she managed to get her primary school diploma. That same year, Chu Nok Tu passed away. Before her death, she urged Diana to continue her studies and strive to get her lower secondary diploma. Because of her dying words, Diana studied diligently and earned her secondary school diploma. Holly Lewis then asked, "Diana, you fell and injured your arm at the beginning of the year, leaving a large scar. Do you remember injuring your arm?" Thea Dawson felt that Holly Lewis was very astute, probing her. She rolled up her right sleeve, revealing a large, walnut-shaped scar. And said, "Mother, this scar isn't from a fall, it's a burn from Nancy Dawson." At the beginning of the year, because Nancy Dawson was dissatisfied with Tammy Dawson's disobedience, she casually picked up a smoldering piece of firewood and swung it. Diana Dawson, seeing this, stepped forward to intervene, causing the stick to land on her arm, leaving a large burn. Holly Lewis breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed her daughter wasn't possessed by a water ghost. That was good, possession would have required a shaman for an exorcism. Dylan Dawson didn't overthink it, looked up at the sky, and said, "All right, let's hurry and get some work points." With that, he left. There was still enough time to earn 2 or 3 work points. Holly Lewis hid the money inside the house and then hurried out with a hoe. Thea Dawson felt very weary and returned to her room, holding her head. Seeing Naomi Dawson following closely, she smiled and said, "Don't worry, the engagement is broken off. I definitely won't try to die. Go play." She fell asleep on the bed not long after, and by the time she woke up, the sun had set. She went to the door and saw Tammy Dawson washing rice and Naomi Dawson feeding the chickens. Tammy Dawson, upon seeing her older sister, smiled and asked, "Big sister, are you feeling better?" Thea Dawson saw the girl pouring out the rice water and quickly caught it in a wooden basin. "Don't pour this out later. Use a wooden basin to collect it." It was a collective system now. They could only raise chickens at home, not pigs, so the rice water wasn't used and was directly poured out. Tammy Dawson curiously asked, "Big sister, what are you going to do with the rice water?" "Wash your face." Washing her face with rice water could help whiten her skin, she had to endure it. Currently, she was too poor to afford whitening cosmetics. Of course, even if she had money, she couldn't buy any. So, she could only use the most primitive method. One whiteness covers 100 uglinesses, conversely, darkness drags down one's appearance by half. Diana didn't understand skincare, but she cherished this face. Ah, washing your face with rice water. Isn't that dirty? Wash with rice water first, then rinse with well water. Tammy Dawson looked outside, then whispered, if second sister finds out, she'll scold you again. Their family didn't have a well, they had to fetch water from the village well for daily use. Usually, Dylan Dawson fetched the water, but when he was busy, the task fell upon Nancy Dawson. It wasn't that Diana Dawson was lazy, but Nancy Dawson had more strength. She won't dare scold me. She wasn't the original owner. If anyone dared to be disrespectful to her, she would show them what it felt like to be beaten down. After Thea Dawson finished washing her face, she went behind the house to pick vegetables in their family's private plot. Because there were 7 people in the family, they were allocated 7% of the land. Their large family had only one strong laborer, so 2/3 was planted with melons, and the rest with vegetables. The variety in the vegetable garden was abundant, including chili peppers, loofah vines, winged beans, bitter melon, and water spinach. Thea Dawson picked a chili pepper and some eggplants before returning. The kitchen only had oil and salt, even the lard oil was almost gone. Thea Dawson sighed, telling herself that she had to quickly go to the city to find a job, otherwise, they really couldn't survive. Thea Dawson painstakingly prepared 3 dishes and 1 soup, stir-fried bitter melon with chili peppers, eggplant with winged beans, and loofah with egg soup. Fortunately, she knew how to make some simple breakfasts from her previous life, otherwise, relying on Diana's cooking memories, they probably wouldn't be edible. Tammy Dawson said worriedly, elder sister, you used up all the oil. If mother finds out, she'll scold you to death. Don't worry, mother won't scold me. Today, she received $160 in compensation. If Holly Lewis scolded her, she would definitely talk back. Cock-a-doodle-doo. The rooster's loud crow woke Thea Dawson from her deep sleep. She felt someone get up and opened her eyes, finding that it was still dark outside. Why are you getting up before dawn? Tammy Dawson kindly said, if you're not feeling well, go back to sleep. I'll make breakfast. Thea Dawson mumbled in agreement and turned over to sleep. When she woke up again, she found herself alone in bed. Stretching, Thea Dawson put on her heavily patched clothes and went outside. Walking out of the room, she saw Naomi Dawson sweeping the yard. Thea Dawson asked, where are father and mother? Naomi Dawson pointed to the large mountain behind them and said, before dawn, father and mother took second sister up the mountain to gather firewood. Hearing this, Thea Dawson felt a pang of distress. 7 years ago, Holly Lewis had suffered severe postpartum hemorrhage and took over a year to recover. Because of this, the family had fallen deeply into debt. To support the family, Dylan Dawson went up the mountain to cut firewood every day before dawn and after work. He would dry it, chop it, and neatly bundle it to deliver to his cousin in the county town. Of course, it was said to be a gift, but it was actually sold. His cousin would give him money or exchange goods. However, this cousin was very shrewd, knowing that Dylan Dawson's family had no other options, she would only pay half the market price, feeling as though she was helping Dylan Dawson's family. Dylan Dawson and Holly Lewis knew they were being pressured, but they had no other choice, this was the only path they could find. While Tammy Dawson was preparing breakfast, Dylan Dawson specifically asked her to add an egg for Thea Dawson. Toby Dawson stared at the egg in Thea Dawson's hand, gulping, and as Thea Dawson was about to eat it, she blurted out, I want an egg too. Thea Dawson looked at her and said, tell me, Tammy Dawson gets up early to cook and do laundry, Naomi Dawson picks vegetables and sweeps the yard. What about you? What did you do this morning? Toby Dawson was speechless. Thea Dawson divided half of the egg for Naomi Dawson, saying, Naomi Dawson worked today, so she can eat an egg. You didn't work, so you don't get an egg. Toby Dawson anxiously said, I'll definitely work tomorrow, give me the egg first. From today on, if you don't work, you won't get any good things. Because Toby Dawson was lazy and didn't like to be clean, Holly Lewis had beaten her countless times, but it was useless. Thea Dawson felt that to change her, they had to start with food. Seeing Naomi Dawson come into the kitchen and take out a piece of oil paper, Thea Dawson curiously asked, "I told you to get a bowl, why are you taking this?" Naomi Dawson whispered, "Breakfast is almost ready. I'll keep this egg and eat it when I'm hungry." Saying that, she carefully placed half of the egg in the oil paper, gently wrapping it, her solemn attitude as if she were doing something sacred. Toby Dawson, not getting an egg, burst into tears. Contrasting the two girls with her own childhood, when her grandmother coaxed her to eat eggs and cake, Thea Dawson suddenly felt ashamed. A while later, Dylan Dawson, Holly Lewis, and Nancy Dawson returned. The three quickly washed their faces and ate. Because they had to start working immediately, they ate very quickly, and Thea Dawson felt a pang of sadness seeing this. As the whistle blew outside, the couple immediately dropped their chopsticks, grabbed their farming tools, and went out, followed closely by Nancy Dawson and Tammy Dawson. Toby Dawson and Naomi Dawson were still too young to work in the fields, but they could collect pigweed and herd cattle. These were light tasks, specifically assigned by the team leader considering their family's difficulties, otherwise, the sisters wouldn't have gotten them. This showed that the team leader was a good person. Thea Dawson wasn't idle either. She first took the sheets and mats out to sun them, then swept and tidied the kitchen. Naomi Dawson returned from herding the cattle and saw the cupboard, pots, pans, and bowls by the door. She scratched her head, her face puzzled, and asked, "What are you doing, sister?" Thea Dawson wiped her sweat, smiling, "The kitchen was too dirty. I'm reorganizing it. I'm going to rest for a bit. You get ready to cook." Diana Dawson had always been hardworking, so Naomi Dawson didn't suspect anything. Near noon, the two began to cook. Thea Dawson was preparing to stir-fry vegetables when suddenly a cry came from outside. Naomi Dawson dropped the fire tongs, stood up, and said, "Fourth sister is crying." When they went out of the kitchen, they saw Nancy Dawson dragging a sobbing Toby Dawson into the yard. One had messy hair and blood on her face, the other had a clear handprint on her cheek. Thea Dawson was about to speak when Nancy Dawson shoved Toby Dawson to the ground, furiously scolding, "Were you reborn a starving ghost? How many times have I told you not to snatch other people's food, yet it goes in one ear and out the other? You deserve to be beaten to death." Thea Dawson's face darkened upon hearing this. If it were just children playing around, Toby Dawson making a mistake and the other child retaliating harshly would be understandable. But an adult striking a child is unacceptable. If they didn't pursue this, the other family would think they were easy targets. Nancy Dawson looked at her still crying sister and angrily kicked her. "Cry, cry, cry. You still have the face to cry. You've lost all our face." Thea Dawson pulled her sister back, saying, "Toby Dawson was wrong, but she's already like this. Don't hit her anymore." Nancy Dawson flung Thea Dawson's hand away, her eyes red-rimmed. "It's all your fault. If you had quietly waited to get married and hadn't gone crazy and fallen into the river, with the Rollins family's backing, they wouldn't dare bully us like this." Back then, she was overjoyed at the prospect of this marriage. With such a powerful brother-in-law, not only would they have a tiled-roof house and a better life, but no one in the village would dare bully them. But her happiness was short-lived. The marriage fell apart after just 2 days, and their family's situation became even worse. Every time she thought about it, she felt especially resentful. Thea Dawson's eyes narrowed. The Rollins family is a pit of fire. Would you push your own sister into a pit of fire just for a better life? Nancy Dawson disagreed, pointing at Thea Dawson's nose and scolding, "What pit of fire? The Rollins family is clearly a nest of blessings. You believe a few gossiping words. It's your own stupidity, don't drag us down with you." Nancy Dawson didn't know about yesterday's broken engagement. Dylan Dawson and Holly Lewis hadn't told her, so she still thought Seth Rollins was a good person. Thea Dawson ignored Nancy Dawson, went over to help Toby Dawson up, and then scooped some water to wash her face, asking gently, "Who hit you?" Toby Dawson sobbed, "Timothy Turner's mother hit me. I didn't mean to, but the White Rabbit creamy candy was so delicious, I couldn't resist." Thea Dawson quickly thought, Timothy Turner, Penny Turner's second younger brother? Yes. The Turner family had 3 daughters and 2 sons. Mr. and Mrs. Turner weren't hard-working, and their life was even harder than theirs. Where would they get the money to buy creamy candy? A thought struck Thea Dawson. Was the candy from Lily Dawson's family? Toby Dawson sobbed, "Yes, Sister Lily's family not only gave us White Rabbit creamy candy and a big piece of meat, but also 2 boxes of malt extract for Sister Penny to nourish her body, and also a few sets of clothes for Sister Penny." She had been waiting for Lily Dawson to tell everyone that Diana was the one who saved her, so the rumors would collapse. Now it seemed the worst-case scenario had come to pass. Toby Dawson's eyes lit up. "I heard malt extract is delicious. Daniel Turner and Timothy Turner are so lucky." Thea Dawson didn't know what to say. One moment she was crying her heart out, the next she forgot all about being beaten at the mention of food. This level of detachment was truly something else. Thea Dawson helped Toby Dawson smooth her hair and then took her hand, preparing to go out. Seeing this, Nancy Dawson quickly stepped forward to stop them, her face dark. "What are you doing? That shrew isn't someone to mess with. Are you going to their door alone to get yourself beaten to death?" This hair and the wound on her face were courtesy of that shrew's claws. Of course, the other woman didn't get off scot-free, she got a good walloping. "If they hadn't pulled me off, that harpy wouldn't be able to crawl away." Toby Dawson, not wanting to be hit, stopped in his tracks. Thea Dawson shook her head. "We're not going to Penny Turner's house, we're going to Lily Dawson's. Timothy Turner's milk candies all come from Lily. If we go there, maybe we can get some." Toby Dawson, filled with excitement at the thought, tugged at Thea Dawson's hand. "Sis, let's go, quick." Nancy Dawson flew into a rage. "Diana Dawson, what are you trying to pull? We can't afford to mess with Lily Dawson's family." Diana Dawson's real name is Lily Dawson, the same as Lily Dawson, the pronunciation is different. Not only that, the two were born on the same day, but their lives are completely different. Diana Dawson is the eldest sister in the family, with 5 younger sisters, including Lydia Dawson who was taken away, and the family is extremely poor. Lily Dawson is the only daughter in the family, with 5 older brothers. The eldest brother is a farmer at home and also runs a tractor, the second brother teaches elementary school in the town above, the third brother Kofi Dawson is a driver for a shipping company, and can earn a lot of money outside, the fourth brother joined the army last year, the fifth brother Neil and she are twins, and will be entering university in 2 months after receiving a recommendation letter. In Dawson Village, Lily Dawson's family was the wealthiest, even surpassing Thea's uncle, the village head. Thea Dawson's expression remained calm. "I'm not going to cause trouble. I'm going to Lily Dawson's house to clear something up. If you're worried, you can come with me." Nancy Dawson's face paled. "You suddenly jumped into the river to kill yourself, was it because of Neil Dawson? Let's not even talk about the fact that Diana did have a secret crush on Neil, but she knew she wasn't good enough for him, so she never revealed her feelings. Now, as Thea Dawson, she certainly wouldn't admit it. Nancy Dawson, how does my ruined reputation benefit you? And you called Toby Dawson stupid? I think you're the stupid one. How could her younger sister benefit from her ruined reputation? She suspected Nancy Dawson's brain was made of tofu. Nancy Dawson, pale-faced, offered no retort. Thea Dawson, no longer engaging with Nancy, pulled Toby Dawson away. Their house was on the west side of the hill, while Lily Dawson's was in the middle of the village. Walking in canvas shoes on the rough, stony country road was painful, even in sunny weather. If it rained, the road would be impassable. A middle-aged woman in gray clothes and a blue cloth bag appeared before them. Seeing Diana Dawson, she said pointedly, "Diana, they say a hard life is better than a good death. You're so young, how could you be so foolish? All men are the same once you're under the covers with them." These seemingly concerned words were like rubbing salt in a wound. Toby Dawson instinctively knew it wasn't meant kindly, but didn't know how to respond. Thea Dawson, knowing this woman and Holly Lewis were at odds, simply chuckled dryly. "If you think all men are the same under the covers, there's a lame bachelor in the village. Perhaps you should take him a basket of plums and offer yourself as his bride." The woman, stunned into silence, could only gape as Thea Dawson pulled Toby Dawson away. Toby Dawson, leading Thea Dawson to a large blue brick house, whispered, "Maybe we should go back. Lily Dawson's brothers are tough, and her mother is fierce. Our mother has never gotten the better of her." Thea Dawson sighed inwardly, completely devoid of any suspicion that Penny Turner was lying. It was fortunate it happened to her, otherwise Diana's death would have been too unjust. The rural doorway opened, and Thea Dawson, standing at the entrance, saw Sean Dawson's extended family eating in the main house. She didn't enter, but called out from the doorway, "Uncle Shien, Aunt." Although both families shared the Dawson surname, Dylan Dawson was a local, born and raised. Sean Dawson's father had fled to this place during the famine before liberation. The old man, clever and resourceful, quickly established himself here. Toby Dawson tugged at Thea Dawson's sleeve, whispering, "Sis, I smell meat. They're eating meat." Sean Dawson's entire family was surprised to see Diana and Toby Dawson. Their family had little interaction with Dylan Dawson's family. Jasmine Malone, the lady of the house, set down her chopsticks and came out to ask, "Diana, what's the matter?" Thea Dawson's face was expressionless as she said, "Aunt, I have something to ask Lily Dawson." Jasmine Malone was a bit perplexed. Her daughter and Diana Dawson didn't interact, but having already said that, she couldn't very well turn them away. "Come in and talk." After saying that, she politely added, "Have you eaten yet? If not, you can eat here." Hearing this, Toby Dawson couldn't help but salivate, "No, not yet." Thea Dawson pulled her sister firmly, saying, "No need, Aunt. We've already prepared our meal. We'll eat after I've spoken with Lily Dawson." Sean Dawson's house was very large, a 3-room main house, with 2 rows of 2-room side wings on the left and right, as well as a kitchen and woodshed. Moreover, their house was built with blue bricks, unlike hers, which used ugly wooden planks. Lily Dawson, having overheard their conversation, stood up and asked with a smile, "Diana, what is it you want with me?" Looking at Lily Dawson, Thea Dawson immediately understood why both Diana and all the other girls in the village admired her. Lily Dawson wore a light blue, flower-dotted ankle-length dress and white butterfly-bow sandals. Her skin was fair, her complexion rosy, and her large eyes were incredibly lively. This girl, in both her attire and appearance, seemed to belong to a different world than the other village girls. Seeing her staring without speaking, Lily Dawson prompted, "Diana, what is it?" Thea Dawson pushed Toby Dawson forward, pointing to the 5-finger mark on her face, and said, "Penny Turner's mother gave my sister this slap." Neil Dawson found Thea Dawson ridiculous, scoffing, "If she was hit by someone, go find that person. What are you doing coming to our house?" Jasmine Malone also didn't understand Thea Dawson. While Penny Turner's mother hitting a child was wrong, it had nothing to do with her family. "Diana, if you feel wronged, have your parents go to Penny's house to demand justice." They all said this girl was clever, and now it seemed they were right. Neil Dawson very rudely told them to leave. "Diana Dawson, as you can see, we're eating and don't have time to chat. Go home. We won't hold this incident against you." His hostile attitude stemmed from 2 things. 1, he believed Diana Dawson was making up stories and gossiping. 2, he always disliked Dylan Dawson's family, finding their character despicable and shameless. Thea Dawson glanced at Neil Dawson. He wore a white shirt and army green trousers. He had very fair skin and bright eyes, looking like a sunny young man. Jasmine Malone spoke without hesitation, "Diana, we brought the milk candy, but our family has nothing to do with this matter." Thea Dawson looked towards Lily Dawson with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You also think this has nothing to do with your family?" Lily Dawson felt her attitude was strange, and couldn't help but frown. "Diana, if you have something to say, just say it directly. I don't understand what you're getting at." Toby Dawson was a little anxious. She wanted to go home now, so she tugged hard on Thea Dawson's hand. Thea Dawson spoke coldly, "I came to your house not because I'm crazy, but because I was the one who saved you yesterday. I almost died saving you. I woke up to find that I'd gone from rescuer to attempted suicide, and my parents were labeled as villains who sold their daughter. I thought that after you returned to the village, you would explain things to everyone, but not only did you not corroborate my story, you even brought these gifts to Penny Turner's house." Crash! Mrs. Dawson, startled, dropped the bowl in her hand. It shattered on the blue tile floor. Neil Dawson didn't believe her at all, scoffing, "You say you saved our Lily? Then why didn't you say so yesterday? Why come today?" Sean Dawson roared angrily, "Neil, shut your mouth." Because he was the youngest son, he wasn't usually disciplined strictly, and they hadn't realized he was so clueless about how to treat people. Someone coming to their door claiming to have saved someone must have proof, otherwise, why would they come and talk about it? Jasmine Malone asked Lily Dawson, "Lily, who actually saved you?" Lily Dawson shook her head. "Mother, after I fell in the water, my mind went blank. I don't remember anything after someone approached me. As for who saved me, I don't know. Penny Turner said she saved her, so she naturally believed her." Thea Dawson said, "Yesterday, I was washing clothes by the river when I suddenly heard someone shouting for help. I saw you struggling in the water and immediately jumped in to save you. You were panicked, and if I got too close, you would have grabbed me and drowned us both. I had no choice but to knock you unconscious and drag you to the shore. After I pushed you onto the bank and tried to climb out myself, I suddenly got a cramp and was swept downstream. Luckily, I was fortunate enough to grab a branch on the bank and then, with all my strength, swam ashore. Actually, it wasn't luck. The original Diana Dawson had drowned, and Thea had taken her place. She was a good swimmer, and even though she was still dazed, she knew she was drowning, so she saved herself, otherwise, she would have been a ghost by now." Neil Dawson still didn't believe her. "If you saved her, why didn't you say so yesterday? Why come to my house today?" Thea Dawson felt that Diana had been completely fooled by this man's appearance. He looked good, but he was useless, like a fancy embroidered pillow, nice to look at, but not practical. "I was unconscious for half a day after I got out of the water, and when I finally woke up, I had a terrible headache. My parents believed Penny Turner's lies and thought I'd tried to drown myself because I didn't want to marry Seth Rollins. They were so scared they quickly borrowed money from the team and my second uncle to break off the engagement with the Rollins family." Jasmine Malone was astonished. "Diana, you broke off the engagement?" "Yes, yesterday afternoon." Mrs. Dawson grew suspicious. "I heard that Cadre Rollins came to your house yesterday afternoon and left injured. You went into the water to save Lily, so why did you break off the engagement?" Thea Dawson spoke frankly, "That Rollins fellow is old, ugly, and already has 4 children, the eldest only 2 years younger than me. My family was so poor that I agreed to ease my parents' worries. But things are different now. I risked my life to save Lily, and I trust you won't mistreat me, so naturally, I don't want to jump into this fiery pit anymore." From the start, she hadn't wanted anything, only for Lily Dawson to clear Diana and Dylan Dawson's names. But Neil Dawson cruelly accused her of faking the rescue for personal gain. If it weren't too unfair to Diana, this girl, who nearly died saving Lily Dawson, would have let it go. Jasmine Malone's eyebrows twitched upon hearing this. Neil Dawson said coldly, "You claim you saved my sister. Where's the proof?" Thea Dawson scoffed. "When I reached Lily Dawson, she gripped my arms and shoulders tightly. The bruises are still visible." Neil Dawson immediately seized on this, sneering, "You're a shameless liar. Lily can't even snap a beanstalk. How could such a small girl have the strength to grab your arms?" Lily Dawson blushed. Hearing this, Thea Dawson asked, "I heard you were top of your class in high school. Don't change the subject. How could such a brainless idiot achieve such academic success?" Thea Dawson said, "Lily Dawson was drowning, struggling desperately for life. In her panic, she grasped at anything that might save her. A dying person can exhibit unimaginable strength. That's why I had to knock her unconscious. Otherwise, she wouldn't have let go, and we both would have drowned." Pausing deliberately, Thea Dawson looked at Lily Dawson and said, "I struck the back of your neck. I hit you hard, afraid you wouldn't lose consciousness. So, your neck must have hurt terribly when you woke up." Lily Dawson nodded. "Yes, the back of my neck ached unbearably when I woke up. The doctor said I'd been hit." Thea Dawson hummed in agreement. "Penny Turner is 15, skinny and small. Do you think she has the strength to pull someone ashore? If you still don't believe me, ask her about the rescue." She added with malice, "Of course, if you insist on crediting Penny Turner, I'll just consider myself unlucky. I'll also warn my sisters not to be good Samaritans in the future, lest they endanger their families by helping others." Jasmine Malone immediately responded, "Don't be foolish, child. We must investigate this thoroughly." In truth, she believed Thea Dawson, but the thought of Holly Lewis gave her a headache. Sean Dawson pondered for a moment. "Daughter-in-law, go to the Bernard residence and inquire about Penny's rescue." Thea Dawson added, "Sister-in-law Dawson, don't just ask about the rescue. Check Penny Turner for injuries, too." Dawson's eldest daughter-in-law glanced at Sean Dawson. Seeing him nod, she hurried out. Sean Dawson said, "Wife, get 2 more sets of bowls and chopsticks. Diana, Toby Dawson, you two will have dinner with us tonight." Stir-fried peppers and meat, scrambled eggs with chives sat on the table. Eyeing the glistening fat on the meat, Toby Dawson swallowed hard. Unfortunately, Thea Dawson didn't comply with her wish, politely refusing. Thea Dawson allowed Jasmine Malone to examine the bruises on her body. Although her face was tanned, the skin on her body and arms was relatively fair, making the blue marks particularly prominent. Lily Dawson blushed, saying, "Diana, I'm truly sorry, I really don't remember who saved me yesterday." Thea Dawson didn't say she wasn't blaming anyone, only stating, "Penny Turner is so frail, wouldn't you doubt her ability to save someone?" Because Bernard Turner and Susie Morgan favored sons over daughters, any good food in the house was reserved for their 2 sons, while the 3 daughters worked from dawn till dusk and still didn't have enough to eat. It was because of these comparisons that Tammy Dawson felt very fortunate. Lily Dawson, thinking of Penny Turner's slight frame, remained silent. Returning to the main house, Toby Dawson was already happily eating. Only when she saw Thea Dawson did she try to feign composure, saying, "Eldest sister, you should come eat too." This was meat, mind you, the last time they had meat was during the Dragon Boat Festival. Since they were already at the table, scolding them wouldn't be helpful, and it wasn't appropriate to discipline children in someone else's home. Thea Dawson said with a touch of resignation, "You eat. I'm not hungry yet. I'll eat when I get home after dealing with things." "Yes." Toby Dawson replied affirmatively and took another bite of meat. Oh, how delicious the meat was. After Sean Dawson's family finished their meal, Mrs. Dawson brought Penny Turner over. The girl was pale and sallow, her hair dry and yellow, looking to be only 12 or 13 years old. She entered the house, crying, "Diana, I clearly saved Lily. How can you say you saved her? Diana, how could you do this? Jasmine Malone asked, you say you saved Lily? Then tell us how you rescued her. Penny Turner wiped her tears and said, yesterday, after I finished picking wild vegetables, I went to the river to bathe, and I happened to see Lily in the water shouting for help. I jumped into the water to save her, but Lily was so scared she kept clinging to me. I had no choice but to knock her unconscious. Where did you hit her? On the back of her neck. Jasmine Malone and Sean Dawson both frowned simultaneously. At this moment, Neil Dawson exclaimed, Penny's story matches Diana Dawson's. What do you have to say now? Thea Dawson, observing her description, which was nearly identical to her own, couldn't help but look towards Mrs. Dawson. Penny Turner's house is only a few steps away. Why did it take you half an hour to return? Mrs. Dawson, caught off guard by Thea Dawson's sudden question, said with a forced smile, Penny wasn't home just now. I waited a long time before I saw her. Thea Dawson, seeing her guilty expression, knew she was lying. First Neil Dawson, now Mrs. Dawson, she felt extreme disgust towards this family. But this only strengthened her resolve. Toby Dawson touched the back of her neck and said, that's not right. Before, you told the villagers that you saw my eldest sister jump into the river to commit suicide and then happened to see Lily accidentally fall into the water. Now you're saying you saw Lily struggling in the water and crying for help while you were walking by the river. Why are your stories inconsistent? Thea Dawson glanced at Toby Dawson with a hint of surprise. The lass was quite clever indeed. Penny Turner, near frantic, cried, it truly was me who saved Lily. Sister Diana, you can't claim to have saved Lily just because my mother hit Nancy Dawson and Toby Dawson. Before anyone could speak, Penny Turner raised her hand and declared, if you don't believe me, I can swear. May lightning strike me dead if I've uttered a single lie. Sean Dawson and Jasmine Malone were momentarily unable to reach a decision. Neil Dawson also believed Penny Turner. If she were lying, she wouldn't dare make such a venomous oath. Diana Dawson, what do you have to say? Do you have the guts to swear the same oath? Thea Dawson found this amusing. So, swearing an oath proves she's the savior. By that logic, any murderer could swear their innocence and everyone would believe them. What need would there be for police or prisons? Continuously mocked, Neil Dawson's anger flared. You're still lying, even now. You're truly beyond redemption. Thea Dawson, ignoring the imbecile, turned to Penny Turner. So, you're saying you know how to swim? While not as strict as ancient times, where boys and girls couldn't interact closely after the age of 7, the expectations for women were still harsh. For instance, they couldn't wear clothes that revealed their limbs, lest they be deemed indecent. Young women couldn't be seen too close to men, lest they be labeled as wanton and shameless. Therefore, despite living near the river, few women knew how to swim. Firstly, due to the prevailing sexism, young girls were burdened with chores. Secondly, older girls were forbidden from entering the water. Penny Turner nodded softly. I do. My older brother taught me. Thea Dawson nodded, then turned to Sean Dawson. Uncle Sean, I've said she lacks the strength to save Lily. It's easy to prove who's lying. Have Lily go back in the water, and let's see who can save her. Lily Dawson shrieked, no. I don't want to go in the water. Yesterday's terror had left her with nightmares. The mere sight of the river filled her with dread. She wouldn't go back in for anything. Seeing her daughter's fear, Jasmine Malone embraced her. No, we won't go in. Thea Dawson saw a simple solution. We can find someone of similar build to Lily who can't swim. I'm sure if Uncle Sean offers a small reward, someone will agree. Sean Dawson didn't object, but asked, what if Penny manages to save her? Inwardly, he was convinced Thea Dawson had saved his daughter, but needed proof to settle the dispute. Thea Dawson replied, if she can save someone from the same spot as yesterday, I'll retract my claim of saving Lily Dawson. Neil Dawson fumed, no. That's too advantageous for you. His belief in Penny Turner fueled his objection. Thea Dawson chuckled. Then what do you propose? Neil Dawson's face was cold. I want you to kneel and apologize to Penny. And from now on, you'll avoid us. Your attitude towards me is so hostile. If it's proven she's lying, you'll kneel and kowtow 3 times, and from now on, give me a wide berth. Agreed? She didn't need to be polite to this kind of idiot. Sean Dawson scolded, Neil, what nonsense are you spouting? Go and fetch your uncle quickly. He knew his son was a bit impulsive, but he hadn't realized he was this impatient. No, he needed to temper his son's character before university. Otherwise, with this temperament, he feared Neil would suffer losses. Thea Dawson knew he was shielding Neil Dawson and didn't continue. She had thought this matter could be resolved quickly, but she hadn't expected so many nasty things to crop up. How interesting. Everyone said the Sean Dawson family were intelligent. Whether they were intelligent or not, she didn't know, but today she could see that everyone in this family had their own agenda. They could maintain a peaceful facade for now, but once this balance was broken, the whole family would crumble. Captain Dawson arrived quickly. After learning the source of the issue, he looked at Thea Dawson with a complicated expression. The lass hadn't mentioned saving someone yesterday, deliberately letting Dylan Dawson and Holly Lewis misunderstand that she'd jumped into the river to commit suicide, leading them to break off the engagement. Now that the marriage was off and relations were broken beyond repair, she revealed the rescue. This girl had become quite scheming after falling into the water. Sean Dawson said with a troubled expression, elder brother, both Diana and Penny insist they're right and both are injured. Elder brother, do you think we should try what Diana suggested? Captain Dawson glared at him. Try what? This deep water is not a game. What if something goes wrong? Thea Dawson smiled. Have 2 skilled swimmers watch from the side, and nothing will go wrong. Captain, this is the most direct and effective way to determine who the rescuer was. Captain Dawson didn't dare underestimate Thea Dawson now, but he couldn't follow her suggestion. If something happened and someone died, both families would be held responsible. No need to go into the water. Report it to the authorities. He then looked at Thea Dawson and Penny Turner. When the police arrive and find out who's lying, that person will be sent for re-education through labor. Lying wouldn't necessarily lead to re-education through labor, but there would definitely be a penalty. Penny Turner's face paled, but thinking about how she'd not only eaten her fill these past 2 days but also avoided her parents' beatings, she gritted her teeth. Captain, I saved her. Thea Dawson suddenly asked, Captain, if she's found to be lying, how long will the re-education be? This isn't a serious matter, so it's probably 3 to 5 months, right? The re-education period wasn't long, but being sent there would ruin one's reputation. No decent person would marry such a girl. Captain Dawson paused, wondering how this girl knew so much. This isn't particularly serious. Half a year, and she'll be released. Thea Dawson now had a baseline. She sighed. Penny Turner, if you confess now, I won't pursue this matter. But if you stubbornly persist in your foolish ignorance, and the police find out, your family will be branded as having a bad element. Your 2 younger brothers won't be able to join the army or go to university. Do you think your parents will beat you to death then? Penny Turner, a naive young woman, trembled with fear upon hearing this. One composed, the other trembling with fear, it was clear who held the true answer. Sean Dawson shook his head and said, Penny, we won't pursue this matter further. You can go home. Upon hearing the words, go home, Penny Turner suddenly cried out, no. I was the one who saved her, not Diana. She jumped in the river to kill herself. Thea Dawson was taken aback. One would think her home was a den of tigers and bears, the way Penny reacted. Captain Dawson, seeing her like this, immediately said, "Penny, don't worry, I'll handle this. You can keep the things we gave you for your health, you don't need to return them. Even if your parents find out, they won't punish you." Penny Turner, her face streaked with tears, stared intently and asked, "Really?" Sean Dawson didn't want to make a big deal out of this, as it would affect their family's reputation. "Don't worry, what's been given is yours now." Jasmine Malone felt like spitting blood. Those items were all bartered by her son, especially the 2 boxes of malt extract, which required pulling strings to acquire, as they weren't available at the supply and marketing cooperative. However, since her husband and the captain had spoken, she dared not object. Only then did Penny Turner begin to sob, "Uncle Swan, you promised." "Don't worry, I won't go back on my word." "Penny, can you now tell us the truth about what happened?" Though he disliked Penny Turner, he needed to understand the situation clearly and avoid further ambiguity. Having received the promise, Penny Turner no longer hesitated. I was washing wild vegetables by the river yesterday and saw Lily lying on the bank, while Diana was still struggling in the water. In the heat of the moment, I claimed to have saved Lily." Thea Dawson didn't believe her lies. "Not only did you try to steal credit from me, but you also fabricated a story about me attempting suicide." "Why?" Penny Turner's expression stiffened, and she continued to cry. "At that time, I had no other choice. They kept asking me why she was by the river. I panicked and spoke nonsense." Thea Dawson scoffed. "First, it was, in the heat of the moment, and now it's panic." "Penny Turner, do you think everyone here is foolish enough to be deceived by your flimsy excuses? Your mother and my mother have always been at odds. By saying this, you're trying to ruin my parents' reputation to please your mother. You're so young, yet so malicious. It's frightening to think you might have inherited this wickedness." Captain Dawson glanced at Thea Dawson. It seemed falling into the river had changed her. She was not only resourceful but also sharp-tongued. Penny Turner knelt on the ground, crying and kowtowing. "Diana, I know I've wronged you, and I apologize. But I truly didn't want to harm anyone. Diana, I really never intended to hurt anyone, please believe me." Due to the force and the hard blue bricks, Penny Turner's forehead quickly began to bleed. Jasmine Malone and sister-in-law Dawson felt a pang of sympathy seeing her like this. Lily Dawson also frowned. However, none of them spoke, only looking at Captain Dawson and Sean Dawson. Neil Dawson also pitied Penny Turner and couldn't help but say, "Diana Dawson, be forgiving and merciful. I believe Penny didn't do it on purpose. Now that she has confessed, there's no need to pursue this any further." Thea Dawson's anger twisted into a bitter laugh. "Not pursue it? Neil Dawson, you make it sound so simple. If I hadn't managed to climb out yesterday, I'd be a ghost now, and my parents would not only bear the pain of losing a daughter but also the stigma of driving her to suicide." Neil Dawson felt her fury radiating off her. "You just said that if Penny told the truth, you wouldn't pursue it. How can you go back on your word?" "A knife doesn't hurt unless it's in your own flesh," Thea Dawson said coldly. "I won't pursue her reckless impersonation in the rescue, but her fabrication about my suicide attempt is not so easily forgotten." With that, she tugged Toby Dawson towards home, but Toby resisted. The little girl's logic was simple. Penny Turner had received milk candy and malt treats for rescuing Lily Dawson. Now that it was confirmed her elder sister was the true rescuer, how could they return empty-handed? They deserved something too. Thea Dawson, reading her sister's expression, grabbed Toby Dawson's hand and pulled her along. Dawson's eldest sister-in-law helped Penny Turner up. "Go home," she said. Penny Turner cried, "Mama, she'll beat me to death." Such a lie deserved a beating, but seeing the girl's pitiful tears and the blood on her forehead, Dawson's sister-in-law felt a pang of sympathy. "Mother, I'll take her home." Jasmine Malone didn't speak, just waved her hand dismissively. Captain Dawson called Sean Dawson into the house. Diana's personality has changed drastically since she fell in the water. You've allowed them to suffer such a great injustice. You must take care to appease them. Sean Dawson nodded. I understand. As they left Sean Dawson's house, Thea Dawson lowered her hand. Toby Dawson mumbled, Sister, they gave Timothy Turner's family so many things. Why didn't they give us anything? At midday, Thea Dawson had no desire to chat with her younger sister under the scorching sun. She strode quickly towards home. As soon as she arrived, Holly Lewis scolded her. Did you lose your brain when you fell in the water? That shrew struck your sister. You should have confronted her directly. Why did you run to Sean Dawson's house? It was precisely because her daughters had gone to Sean Dawson's house that she hadn't gone looking for them. That pretentious Jasmine Malone wouldn't dare to make things difficult for her daughters there. Toby Dawson quickly explained, the white rabbit milk candy and the malt treats should be ours, Mama. You must go to Timothy Turner's house and get them back. Thea Dawson, famished to the point of her stomach touching her spine, ignored her sister and went to the kitchen to eat. Holly Lewis smacked Toby Dawson's head. All you think about is eating. You'll eat yourself, stupid. What do you mean, should be ours? Those were gifts from Sean Dawson's family. What does it have to do with us? She'd heard the gossip and it stung. Whose fault was it that her daughter lacked ambition? Others jumped in to save lives, while hers jumped in to end her own. She'd had to swallow the snide remarks about selling her daughter when she started work today. Toby Dawson waved her hands. No, Mama, it wasn't Timothy Turner's older sister who saved Lily. It was my eldest sister. What? What did you say? Holly Lewis wondered if she was hallucinating. Toby Dawson tilted her head back, a smug look on her face as she said, Ma, you heard right. Sis didn't jump in the river to kill herself yesterday, she saved someone. Sis and Lily were both unconscious, so Timothy Turner took the credit. Thinking of the milk candy and other delicious treats, Toby Dawson's heart leaped with joy, her mouth watering. Holly Lewis rushed into the kitchen like a whirlwind, pulling Thea Dawson towards the table. Toby Dawson said you didn't fall in the river yesterday, you saved someone. Diana, is she telling the truth, or is it just gibberish? Thea Dawson replied with a nod, Toby Dawson is right. I saved Lily Dawson. Penny Turner just admitted it in front of Captain Dawson and Xian Ba's whole family. But Xian Ba also said, seeing Penny Turner's hardship, they'd let her keep the gifts as a tonic. Holly Lewis roared, based on what? Those things should be ours. No way, I'm going to get them back. Thea Dawson stopped her, saying, Ma, don't go to Penny Turner's house yet. Wait until I'm finished eating. I have a few things to discuss with you and Pa. What is it? More important than this? Thea Dawson was truly famished. Though the wild vegetable porridge and sweet potatoes filled her stomach, the lack of fat made her hungry again quickly. Those things aren't going anywhere. What's the rush? But if you don't listen to me, Ma, I won't interfere in family matters anymore. Holly Lewis felt this girl was becoming more and more unruly, daring to threaten her own mother. But she also knew her daughter's temperament had changed and she wasn't as easily coerced as before, so she didn't dare push too hard. Fine, I'll go get your Pa. Dylan Dawson was resting in his room. Seeing Thea Dawson eating mixed rice with sweet potatoes and cucumbers, Toby Dawson couldn't help but say, Sis, why didn't you eat with me at Xian Ba's house just now? The spicy chili stir-fried with meat was especially delicious. Thea Dawson didn't blame the little girl, simply saying, from now on, if you go to someone else's house to eat without Pa, Ma, or my permission, you'll get none of the good food at home, even if we have some. Toby Dawson didn't take these words to heart at all. At home, they only had decent food during the New Year celebrations. The rest of the year, there was barely anything to eat. Seeing Toby Dawson's indifferent attitude, Thea Dawson didn't bother reminding her further. Once she earned money, there would be plenty of good food at home. Then, if Toby Dawson didn't listen, she could just watch, and let her starve with envy. Dylan Dawson, still groggy from sleep, was roused by Holly Lewis. After hearing what she said, he snapped awake. "Are you serious?" Diana said the girl admitted it herself. "It can't be fake. Dylan, our daughter is getting more and more willful, hiding such a big thing from us without letting anything slip." A pang of bitterness resonated in Holly Lewis's heart as she spoke. Dylan Dawson said, "She didn't tell us because she was afraid we'd find out the truth and refuse to break off the engagement. Consider it a blessing in disguise for our Diana. After this, we don't need to worry about her being bullied." Holly Lewis snorted, "As long as she doesn't become a coward." "She won't. After putting Seth Rollins in his place yesterday, how could she be a coward?" In truth, he was pleased to see the change in his eldest daughter. He didn't have a son, so a fierce daughter was just what they needed to run the household. After their discussion, the couple went outside. Thea Dawson had just finished her meal. Nancy Dawson and Tammy Dawson rushed over, while Toby Dawson, upon seeing Holly Lewis, clung to her side, still waiting for her to go to Penny Turner's house and demand the return of their gifts. Thea Dawson, amused and exasperated, playfully swatted Toby Dawson's back. "Work's about to start. I can't go to Penny Turner's now. Off you go and play." Nothing could delay earning work points. This was the big haul that determined the family's livelihood for the year. Holly Lewis responded with a simple, "Can't go now. We'll see after work." Thea Dawson addressed her parents, "Father, Mother, let's go inside and talk." Dylan Dawson immediately understood, the upcoming discussion wasn't suitable for his younger children's ears. He said, "Nancy Dawson, Tammy Dawson, work is starting soon. Go and rest for a bit." Nancy Dawson, thoroughly disgruntled, returned to her room. Once inside, Holly Lewis angrily questioned, "What needs to be kept from your sisters? We're a family. What can't be said in front of them?" Thea Dawson gently explained, "It's not about deliberately deceiving them. They just can't keep their mouths shut, and then the whole thing might fall apart." Seeing Penny Turner like this, Thea Dawson felt even more grateful for Dylan Dawson and Holly Lewis, and thus, she was more patient with them. Dylan Dawson inquired, "Diana, what is it that even Nancy Dawson can't know?" This sounded serious, but he couldn't fathom any significant issues within their family. Thea Dawson revealed her decision, "The county factory is hiring. Doesn't Kofi Dawson have connections? I saved Lily Dawson's life. If I ask him to pull some strings so I can take the machining test, I doubt he'll refuse." There was no other way. Just returning from Sean Dawson's house, that short distance had been unbearable under the sun. Working in the fields would be even worse, and she wanted to keep her skin fair, so sun exposure was out of the question. Her parents were stunned after hearing this. Their daughter was certainly audacious. Dylan Dawson was intrigued. If Diana had a job, their family's prospects would improve, and it would be easier for Nancy Dawson to find a suitable husband. However, he doubted Sean Dawson's family would agree. Holly Lewis stated bluntly, "Diana, that's wishful thinking. Sean Dawson and Jasmine Malone won't agree." "Why wouldn't they agree?" Holly Lewis responded without hesitation, "Their eldest and second sons are unemployed, and Lily Dawson hasn't started working yet. Even if Neil Dawson gets a job, it'll go to a family member. Why would they give it to you? If he did, both families would be at each other's throats." Thea Dawson chuckled, "At each other's throats. Lily Dawson's godfather pulled strings to get Kofi Dawson that job. Now, he's repaying a life-saving debt for his goddaughter. What grounds do they have to complain? Besides, I'm not asking for a handout, just a chance to take the test. Godparenthood wasn't a casual affair like in the 21st century. It involved a formal ceremony with feasts, kneeling, kowtowing, and a proper bond between the two families. Speaking of which, Lily Dawson was incredibly lucky. 7 years ago, while shopping in town, she encountered an old lady who had fainted. She helped the lady to the hospital, and because of her timely assistance, the lady recovered fully. As it turned out, the old lady's son was none other than Kwong Bok Ton, the deputy manager of the Kwong Bok Ton Transportation Company. He then arranged for Kofi Dawson to work at the company, starting as a temporary worker and becoming a permanent employee a year later. Because Kwong Bok Ton and his wife had only 2 sons and no daughters, and elder Madam Kwong was particularly fond of Lily Dawson, the two families became sworn siblings and visited each other frequently. Holly Lewis asked in surprise, "Aren't they the same? Taking the exam means there's no guarantee of a factory job, right?" Thea Dawson replied, "There's an internal transfer position. The exam is just a formality. Positions requiring talent need genuine skill, and only the top scorer gets it." Kofi Dawson previously mentioned taking the transport company exam, but it's actually an internal transfer. In her past life, she graduated in finance from Shanghai, passed the certified public accountant exam in her 3rd year, and always worked in accounting. So, her goal was to apply for the factory accountant position, but of course, she couldn't say that now. Holly Lewis quickly responded, "So, if you don't come first in the exam, you won't be selected?" Thea Dawson nodded. Holly Lewis flatly refused, "No way. If you can't pass the exam, it'll be a wasted effort. Diana, it's better to choose something else. What kind of benefits do you want? Candy, malt, meat? If I have a job, I can buy those myself later. Mother, we must look at the bigger picture. Don't be blinded by small, immediate gains." Holly Lewis still disagreed, "Diana, I don't have such grand dreams. I just want to live a stable life. After things settle down, I'll find you a good husband." Before, she was so captivated by the job prospect that she didn't realize the other party was a scoundrel, nearly ruining her daughter's life. Now, she didn't dare to pursue this path again. Dylan Dawson clenched and unclenched his fists, clearly still struggling. After a moment, he asked, "Have you made up your mind?" "Yes, I'll talk to Kofi Dawson about this when he returns." Talking to others was pointless, speaking directly to him was best. If Kofi Dawson refused, she would go to town herself to inquire, but Thea Dawson felt that if Kofi Dawson was smart, he wouldn't refuse. Dylan Dawson nodded and said, "If you've decided, then do it. Even if you fail, it's all right. Things can't get any worse than they are now." Holly Lewis exclaimed anxiously, "Husband, how can you be so foolish?" Just then, a whistle blew, abruptly halting the conversation. The couple picked up their tools and went outside. Toby Dawson tugged on Thea Dawson's sleeve and asked, "Sister, what were you talking about with Mom and Dad?" Thea Dawson said pointedly, "I said that the work needs to be redistributed, it can't all be dumped on Tammy Dawson and Naomi Dawson. Don't even think about being lazy from now on." Toby Dawson's face immediately fell. Dylan Dawson and Holly Lewis met at the village gate and headed towards their workplace. A woman named Aunt Zoe asked solicitously, "Holly, it's been 2 days, why hasn't Diana started working yet? What's wrong? Is her head still hurting? If it is, you should take her to the hospital quickly. Don't let it linger." If she hadn't known the truth, Holly Lewis would have scowled, but now she just smiled faintly and said, "Country girls are tough. A little headache and she'll be fine. It's just that she almost lost her life this time, so she needs to recuperate properly. She hasn't earned any work points for days." Seeing her not only alive but also cheerful, the people around Aunt Zoe whispered, wondering if she'd taken the wrong medicine. But with such a good opportunity, Aunt Zoe was unwilling to let it go. "Holly, you can't spoil the child like this. Otherwise, later, if anyone touches her and things don't go her way, she'll go off and try to die. It's truly frightening." Always threatening to die, whose family would dare want a daughter-in-law like that? Holly Lewis snorted contemptuously, what nonsense. My Diana wasn't moping around and trying to drown herself yesterday. She jumped in to save someone. That Turner brat, Thea, stole the credit and slandered my Diana. What? Hearing such explosive news, Aunt Zoe stopped in her tracks, clutching her sickle and exclaiming, "What did you say? Diana didn't fall into the river to kill herself, but to save someone. That Penny girl falsely claimed the credit. I didn't mishear, did I?" Because her voice was quite loud, everyone around heard. They all stopped their work and surrounded Holly Lewis. Holly Lewis said angrily, "That damned brat admitted it right in front of Swan's family and Captain Dawson. If you don't believe me, you can ask the captain. That girl is so vicious. She stole the credit for saving someone from my Diana and then tried to say she jumped into the river to kill herself. Don't let me see her again, or I'll tear her apart." Some busybodies actually went to ask Captain Dawson. Confirming the story was true, everyone was stunned. They hadn't expected such a big twist. Those who envied Thea Turner for the good fortune she'd received now felt a bit of schadenfreude, and some even started to suck up. Aunt Zoe immediately changed her tune. "I said Diana wasn't the type to mope around and jump into the river. See, I wasn't wrong." One of the aunts scoffed, "Aunt Zoe, you're changing your tune pretty quickly. Before, you clearly said that Dylan and Holly were the ones who drove Diana to jump into the river because of money." The two immediately started bickering. Because they were working for the state, many people slacked off and were lazy whenever they could. Those who truly worked hard were usually the honest and kind ones. The others thought that if they slacked off, someone else would do the work, and it would get done anyway. So, a task that could be finished in one day would often be dragged out to 2 or 3 days. As these women gathered together, cutting grass and chatting, they all talked about Diana Dawson saving someone. Holly Lewis's group was the liveliest. Antkin cut a small pile of grass, then sat down on the edge of the field to rest, panting, "Holly, the Dawsons sent good things like malt and milk candy to Bernard's house. Those things should have been yours." Holly Lewis thought the same, but because of Thea Dawson's reminder, she said, "Brother Sean Dawson said those things were to nourish Thea. They belong to their family, so I can't really say anything if they give them away." If it were her usual temperament, she would not only have taken those things back but also demanded compensation. But now, Diana's goal was the job, and as her mother, she couldn't hold her daughter back. Aunt Can's jaw dropped. Everyone in Dawson Village knew Holly Lewis loved taking advantage and hated losing out. Now, with so many good things, she wasn't pursuing it. Was this the Holly Lewis she knew? Wasn't she possessed? The gaggle of aunties, all from the same work group, nodded in agreement. "Holly, that's the right way to think. Those things, valuable as they may be, belong to Sean Dawson's family. They offered them to Penny to help her recover, you can't demand them back. But Diana saved Lily and suffered such a great injustice, Sean Dawson and Jasmine certainly won't mistreat her." Holly relished the words that followed. "Exactly, my Diana truly suffered a great injustice this time. She saved Lily, pulled her ashore, and then suddenly got a cramp. Thankfully, heaven protected her, otherwise, she would have died and been slandered for committing suicide by jumping in the river." Hearing this, Aunt Can and Holly's mother-in-law both felt Penny Turner was truly wicked. By the time work ended, more than half of Dawson Village knew the whole story, and all felt Penny Turner was a malicious child with a cruel heart. Holly Lewis was washing her feet in the stream when a furious shriek rang out. "Holly Lewis, you shameless hussy! It was clearly my Penny who saved Lily, but you claim it was your Diana. Everyone in Dawson Village knows you forced Diana Dawson to jump into the river and try to kill herself." That afternoon, after Nancy Dawson and Toby Dawson had been beaten so badly, Holly Lewis was about to leave work and confront Susie Morgan. Now that Susie had come to her, she would settle both old and new scores at once. The two women quickly grappled with each other. Susie Morgan was strong, while Holly Lewis, though thin, was agile and her attacks were precise and vicious. Each woman clutched a fistful of the other's hair. After being pulled apart, Susie Morgan saw Village Chief Dawson approaching. She sat on the ground, slapping her thighs and wailing, "Chief, you must uphold justice for me. How can you let people bully me like this? My Penny nearly died saving Lily, and now they're twisting the story, saying it was Diana Dawson who rescued her. Chief, you can't be fooled by them." Village Chief Dawson's face darkened. "About this matter," he said, "that child Penny admitted herself this afternoon that when she reached the riverbank, Lily was already unconscious on the shore, and Diana was still struggling in the water." Susie Morgan refused to accept this. "That child must have been threatened by Diana Dawson into lying," she insisted. "Chief, it was definitely my Penny who saved her." As soon as she finished speaking, Holly Lewis retorted, "Yesterday, when I heard people saying your Penny saved Lily, I already felt something wasn't right. Your Penny doesn't get enough to eat and is so skinny a gust of wind could knock her over. How could she possibly have the strength to pull Lily out of deep water? Older people tend to be wiser." Yesterday, she had suspected there was more to the story, but she usually believed in minding her own business, so she kept her thoughts to herself. Now that everything was clear, she didn't mind doing Dylan Dawson a small favor. Everyone agreed with this assessment. Antkin immediately chimed in, "That's right, that's right. Penny's legs wobble when she walks. How could she possibly carry Lily, who's heavier than her?" Lily Dawson, though petite and pretty, was well-fed, with rosy lips and pearly white teeth.